Good day, grade 8 learners. I'm teacher Maggie, and our lesson for today is disease and infection. Infection refers to the abnormal invasion and successful multiplication of disease-causing microorganisms called pathogens in the body. This causes disruption and damage to body tissues or organs. There are four major types of pathogens or pathogenic microorganisms: bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites. Bacteria are small, one-celled, living organisms found in soil, food, animals, and insects. Bacteria can grow and multiply using the nutrients found in its environment. Some examples of bacterial infections are tuberculosis, leptospirosis, and urinary tract infection or UTI. Viruses are very tiny microorganisms that are only able to multiply inside the living cell. Some examples of viral infections are common colds, flu, measles or tick dust, dengue fever, hepatitis, and coronavirus. Fungi are multi-celled microorganisms that cannot survive in soil, water, or air. They need a living organism, like plants or animals, to get enough nutrition. Yeast, molds, and mildew are part of this group. An example of fungal infection is athlete's foot, recognized by the smelly and itchy rash in between the toes. Parasites are organisms that need a living body to reproduce, snatching nutrients for its own growth. Some examples of parasitic infections are ascaris, hookworms, and roundworms, commonly seen in the intestine. Since microorganisms are not easily seen by the naked eye, they can easily spread without our knowledge. Communicable is the word used to describe diseases that are easily transferred from one person to another. Microorganisms can be transferred through air, water, soil, blood, other body fluids. One example of communicable disease is tuberculosis. It is a disease of the respiratory system pertaining to the lungs, wherein the body becomes very thin and experiences night sweats and frequent coughing. When the person's cough, the droplets containing the virus can be inhaled by someone else. Another example is COVID-19, caused by the corona that emerged in 2019 and led to a worldwide pandemic. Scientists are learning more about this virus, and as of now, they know that it spreads through droplets and particles released into the air when an infected person exhales, talks, laughs, coughs, or sneezes. Diseases are recognized through signs and symptoms. Signs are physical changes seen by an individual and the examiner, like a doctor. They can be directly observed and measured. For example, a doctor can spot paleness of lips. A thermometer can measure the degree of fever. High blood pressure can be measured using a spirometer or blood pressure monitor. Symptoms are changes in the body felt by an individual. They are more difficult to measure or observe. Examples are nausea, pain, loss of appetite. These important practices can prevent the spread of microorganisms. Proper food preparation, proper hand washing, and getting vaccinated. There are also important practices to prevent the spread of microorganisms: coughing into a tissue or sleeve, cleaning frequently used surfaces, not sharing personal items like hairbrushes and toothbrushes. Diseases do not just suddenly happen. They develop in stages. Although not all stages are apparent and easily recognizable, knowing the stages makes it easier to understand the behavior of the disease. It allows medical professionals to provide the proper treatment and medication. The first stage is incubation. This period refers to the initial invasion of the pathogen into the body. Pathogen is the microorganisms that carries the disease. During the incubation period, the pathogen starts to multiply. However, the person is still unaware of the disease. The next stage is prodromal. During this period, the pathogen continues to multiply. The person begins to experience signs and symptoms of the disease. The third stage is the illness stage, when signs and symptoms are already obvious and severe. In the decline stage, the number of pathogens starts to decrease, and the signs and symptoms begin to wane. However, because the immune system was greatly weakened by the pathogen, the person becomes susceptible to other kinds of infection. In the convalescence stage, the body begins to recover and eventually returns to its normal functions. The red line on this graph represents the number of pathogens in the body. The blue line represents the severity of signs and symptoms of a disease. As you can see, both increase over time from incubation to the illness stage and begin to decrease in the decline stage. As the number of pathogens inside the body increase, red line, so does the severity of signs and symptoms of disease, blue line. These two healthy habits are example of primary prevention. By developing these habits, you lower your chances of getting disease in the first place. Choose nutritious and varied options. Choose to drink water and milk. Many infectious diseases are contagious during the 5 stages of disease. Contagious means a sick person can spread infection to other people from the time of incubation until convalescence. Diseases can cause morbidity and mortality. Morbidity refers to the state of being sick or ill, while mortality is related to death or the risk of death. In 2014, 5 out of 10 leading causes of morbidity were infectious in origin, namely acute respiratory infection, acute lower respiratory tract infection, influenza, tuberculosis or respiratory, and tuberculosis other form. They say that prevention is better than cure. Prevention is about avoiding disease before it happens or avoiding further complications of an existing disease. When we talk about prevention of disease, there are 3 levels: primary prevention, secondary prevention, and tertiary prevention. Primary prevention includes measures that prevent the onset of disease. The goal is to lower your chances of getting the disease in the first place. Examples of primary preventions are getting immunization shots, getting regular exercise, eating a nutritious diet, having annual checkups with a doctor. Secondary prevention includes measures that lead to early diagnosis and prompt treatment of a disease. The goal is early detection or screening. So, a disease can be treated before it shows very clear and severe signs and symptoms. Examples are laboratory screening for fasting blood sugar, breast examination, and pap smear test. Tertiary prevention aims to re-educate and rehabilitate a person after experiencing a disease. The goal is to prevent complications in the future. For example, diet therapy for a diabetic patient, physical therapy for rehabilitation of a stroke patient. For the assessment of Group 1, you will answer worksheet number 1, Directions. Identify one disease that is caused by each of these pathogens. Research how each disease is acquired. Identify their signs and symptoms, then describe ways to prevent them. For Group 2 assessment, here is your worksheet number 2, Directions. Describe the signs and symptoms of COVID-19. Research this on the internet. And for the assessment of last group, worksheet number 3, Directions. We were taught to follow restrictions and protocols to avoid the transmission of COVID-19. How did your community implement the restrictions and protocols to stop the spread of COVID-19? That's all for today. See you again on next session. Thank you for watching.